Hello and welcome to Elonomics. Monday is normally not the day we do Elonomics, but it's Friday afternoons. But this time, like you know, we did a special episode, Elonomics Plus, with Professor Ela Patnaik and Sajid Chinoy. And we have brought our regular Elonomics this week only to Monday. So Friday Elonomics will resume at its regular time. And you must be expecting us to talk about what's happening in the world, Russia, Ukraine, oil prices touching $130 a barrel, and markets have tanked and all of that. But we have touched on all that on Friday. We had a very, very detailed discussion, almost 40 minutes. And for those of you who missed it, please go back to our YouTube channel and you'll get all the insights you need. But there is something, there are a lot of things that are happening which we cannot ignore. The Ukraine-Russia crisis may be the biggest crisis in the world right now, but there are other things we cannot lose sight of, and that has to do with pensions. And particularly something that has happened in Rajasthan recently and looks like it is going to spread to a lot of other states. Rajasthan has planned to go back to the old pension scheme for its government employees. Why is that such a big deal? Why should Elonomics spend time on Rajasthan's decision on going back to the old pension scheme? Professor Ela Patnaik will explain to us. But before that, we will go into this whole system of pensions. What is it about pensions? Why are we getting so worked up about pensions? Ela, this whole system of pensions, can we talk about what used to be there? We all roughly know that, okay, if you worked in government, you will get pension after you retire, and that's 50% of your salary. But is it that simple?
So that's the old pension scheme. So typically what was there till 2004 for central government employees and state government employees, and most universities, for many other institutions, government related institutions, the system was that when you retire, you will get what is called a defined benefit pension. A defined benefit pension is that you will be receiving your pension till you die. It will be marked to your salary. So say 50% of your last drawn pay. You will, where the question in that system was, where is the money going to come from? And the money was going to come from the budget.
Yep.
So the young would basically pay for the old, and it's an intergenerational transfer, and it would keep happening that, the young, there are always young people, they put more and more, or they pay taxes, and that taxpayer money would fund the people, the pensioners. So that was the defined benefit system. There, I don't know if you want me to go into the reasons why we went into the NPS now or later.
Because I was looking at some. There is a column Ela has written, and it's on our website on the Elonomics section of ThePrint.in. One of the points you make, Ela, I was like, I looked at the number and it was staggering. And I will read that paragraph out to you.
Please.
Civil servants are a tiny fraction of the Indian population. No dispute, it's a fact. However, by the early 2000s, the net present value of the pension promises to civil servants and pensioners added up to about 60% of India's GDP. 60% of India's GDP. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and that is exactly what persuaded Prime Minister Vajpayee to to change the system and to go for the new pension scheme. Now, when you think about that old system, what was happening was that the government spent on pensions, let's say it spent 100 rupees on pensions, it was, the bulk of that money was going to just a few people, a few bureaucrats. It suited the bureaucrats very well. They are also, those who are vocal, they're making the system. So it was a system by them, for them. This was something that they were very happy with. And, there was a lot of lobbying that this is what should continue. But fundamentally, that means that out of your entire population, barely 5% was what you spent the bulk of your pensions on, almost the entire pension budget. So there is another pension scheme, the EPS, Employees Pension Scheme, but that is a very small fraction. The bulk of the pension expenditure of the government was not on workers across the country, was not on farmers, weavers, employees in any other sectors. The bulk of pensions was being spent on a few civil servants. Also, if you look at it from the point, so that's inequitable. But if you also look at it from the point of view of old age security, then this was an economy, this was a society which was increasingly becoming, nuclear families, and the bulk of the people had no old age security. And what were they supposed to do? They were supposed to save in some, there were no, you hear in the West, you hear of Canadian pension teachers,
Retirement funds.
Retirement fund, pension schemes, and those are basically, you keep contributing to those, they collect the money, and then they try to invest the money in various places. India gets resources, it gets money from those. So, you'll hear of a lot of those, but here there was nothing. So, if a poor person had what? National Savings Certificate, like those 6-year certificates with, say 6%, 8% returns, which were typically less than the inflation rate. So, we are broadly, even today, because the reforms have just happened a few years ago and they've started affecting a few people, but we were at that point totally a society which did not give old age benefits to people. We did not give pensions. On the one hand, it assumed that you're still in that family system where,
your kids will take care of you.
Your kids will take care of you. Whereas the kids were going off to different cities, working there, barely able to make their own ends meet. And that system was breaking down, but there was nothing that had replaced it. So the Ministry of Social Justice set up a committee that recommended that we need to have a new pension system. Also, that pension system should be contributory. It should be contributory so that everybody puts in, say, X amount, the employer puts in X amount, so about 25%. So if it was 12.5%, if it was 10, it would be, a fifth. If it was 12.5 and 12.5, then about a fourth of your income would get saved, and you would be able to build a kitty which will then give you returns.
Get saved and invested.
Got saved and invested. And very interestingly, what they recommended was, and that's how it evolved also, is that first we'll put the bureaucrats in that system. Okay, I think that was a very smart.
It is a caste system.
Yeah, the bureaucrats are the one taking away the bulk of the money. So from 1st January 2004, anybody who joins the civil services would be under the new pension system. And states signed up, and various institutions signed up, and everybody then moved to the new pension system. In 2009, it was opened up for the unorganized sector as well, for the public as well, so for others. And the hope was that the bureaucrats would actually make it work, get good fund managers, build good IT systems, because it was a system for them for the first 5 years. And then after that, people would be able to plug in and get the benefits of that system.
I will mention two things which one has heard or experienced over the years. And one is that the old pension scheme, maybe after 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, after you retire, and people's lifespans have increased. And with the inflation adjusted dearness allowance for pensions, after 15 or 20 years, I've heard of cases where people were getting more pension than their last earned salary.
That could well be the case because
of appreciation.
Yeah. And actually, both these factors were adding to the bulk. They were adding to the burden on the exchequer because people were living longer. Okay, and typically, if you notice, the working period has not increased. So it's not that they were continuing to work till 65, 70. They would retire at 60. And so, you work from, let's say, from 30 to 60, roughly, I'm just saying, maybe it could be 25, 28, but let's say 30 to 60. So you put in 30 years and then you lived till 85. And a very good thing, longevity is good. But the point is that then somebody paid for for the years you don't work.
Yeah.
And the burden became really, really heavy. So that was part of the problem.
Also, the investment part, Ila, more than 15 years back, we were talking about these pension funds, and a private bank investment advisor came home because they were selling these funds and make a monthly investment because you'll need this much for retirement and all of that. So they made a calculation. This is your age. This is when you will retire, and this is how long you're expected to live. So if you want this lifestyle after you retire, you invest this much, and that came to something like 40 or 45% of one's salary at that point of time. I said, I cannot invest 40 of, I mean, it doesn't make sense. So I think retirement planning in India has been quite a issue, and only now that people are becoming more aware and there are more products.
See, on fund management, it is also that earlier, because it's not that something was collected and it was invested. So what would happen is that under the old pension scheme, when under the defined benefit scheme, you got a fixed amount. A lot of calculations were made, and that is precisely why the system is different in many countries, is that if instead of that defined, whatever number, if instead of that, because it is investment in the long term, if you invest in equity, you get the equity premium.
Yeah.
Okay,
The appreciation.
So and it's actually, so in the short run, equity is very volatile, and you may worry that you may not get returns. But in the long term, equity gives you
The
higher
best
returns. And in this system, you also had fund managers who could be told, okay, I want 50 debt, 50 in equity, or whatever the composition you wanted, and some 3 standard options would be given to you, and you could choose out of those.
So we'll get to the point of your column this week, which is Rajasthan. They have promised that they will go back to the old pension scheme. What is the problem there?
Civil servants are unhappy that they don't know what they will get. They want to be sure of what they will get. They prefer a defined benefit system. And sure, civil servants, even if asked at that point, civil servants would have said they want a defined benefit system. They get the bulk of, so Rajasthan, 6% of the population is civil servants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About 10 lakh families constituting about 6% of the 1.6 crore will get 56% of the state's revenue.
Exactly. So I wouldn't mind. I mean, if you
Be part of that.
be a part of where people pay taxes and I benefit out of that. So for them to go back to the old pension scheme is basically to give in to what the civil servants wanted. It is inequitable. I mean, that is why, as we spoke about earlier, that the reason why we moved to the NPS, and the real thing that persuaded Prime Minister Vajpayee was this
Inequity.
Two things. One is the inequity, and the second is the huge burden, huge pension burden.
So
You're going back on that.
other states will want to follow
Other
Rajasthan?
states, because civil servants are sitting very near the politicians, and so if you want to please those who are nearest to you, then you can do this. You can ignore all those who are far away.
That's obviously taking the boat in the wrong direction, or rowing the boat back.
And when these liabilities come to pinch, then also that means you'll cut down on other expenses, on building roads, hospitals, schools, because pensions are like the first claim. You go to court and you say, I didn't get my pension, and the court will grant you your pension. So because pensions are that first claim, this actually means that if you make this change, then down the line you're going to spend less on poverty alleviation, nutrition,
Everything
midday
else.
meals, schools, because all those are not fixed.
Yeah.
Those are
You can-
not
you can
things
play
you
with
can.
it.
You can play with it. You don't guarantee that, whereas this you are guaranteeing.
Phew, I shall. Before we take questions, I will just make one point. Pensions are always controversial. I mean, we will not discuss it, but remember what was happening with the military: one rank, one pension. That was another huge
That's
controversy.
actually again this huge pension
Yeah,
burden,
yeah,
and I don't know how and where it will go, because there the retirement age is even lower,
yeah, yeah. They have
and
different retirement ages.
yeah, and now what sort of a burden will it impose on the exchequer?
We have a couple of questions, and we will only talk about pensions. I know people may want to ask us about a lot of other things because, like I said, there are.
We can talk a bit about those if too many
There
questions are
is
on those.
right now we have two questions. So we'll take the first pension question by Tarush, a regular viewer. Hi Tarush, can we have something like 401k, which is in the US?
Well, pretty much, yeah. So you put money in, it is your pension money. Now, what is nice in 401k is that you also get a tax benefit more than, so the entire amount which you put in, it gets much more preferential tax benefit. And I think it would be good to get that here as well.
This is a non-pension question from Vish KL. Why are nations allowing US sanctions to sustain when it is people who are obviously suffering or will suffer because of these sanctions? Is this not some kind of economic terrorism?
YP, why don't you take that question? Because this, I'm sure this is a print has a view and Shaker has a view on
No, no,
this.
it's
So,
nothing to do
yeah.
about print and shaker. Vish, see, what other means do the Western countries or any other countries who want to stop this war have? Short of going and joining Ukraine and fighting Putin and Russia,
And starting a world war.
starting a world war. That is not something
I
we
mean,
want.
if they don't do this and they actually go in and start fighting, then they start a world war.
So this is actually I mean, you might call it economic terrorism, but this is economic terrorism to terrorize quote unquote Vladimir Putin, who has ventured into this misadventure and launched a war in the 21st century against a small neighbor of his, just because he thinks that neighbor should listen to Russia and not have its own independent thought process. So I think sanctions are the most harmless that way. Of course, it will cause damage. I'm not saying it will not cause damage, but what other means do the Western countries have to stop Putin, or do you think they should not stop Putin at all? There's no other side there.
So may I just, when we said we'll take other questions, I mean, we're not taking international relations, history, geography. I mean, we're just taking a few economic questions. So let's just be
that
clear.
was
Yeah.
Vish's question
Yeah.
related to. Let me see if there are any questions on Twitter, because I think people are not so very excited about pensions.
Well,
But
yeah,
you should be.
I think you have that a lot of our viewership is very young, and rightly so. This is not the time to worry about your pensions.
But please invest because you will need to have a corpus at some point of time. One second. Okay. Arun Kumar. Ma'am, why not make it something like private companies with getting, with getting money of pension slash PF from employees' salary rather than from the budget? Isn't it unfair for private employees who pay all the taxes? Same thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what the NPS is, that you pay out of your salary with a matching contribution by the employer. But that's so. That is making it equitable.
Yeah.
That's the whole point we are making, that instead of taxpayers paying out to government employees and to civil servants, we ask civil servants to do a defined contribution rather than the old defined benefit. So the NPS is defined contribution, which is what you're talking about.
In fact, Provident Fund works like that for us. Part of our salary is deducted as Provident Fund and is matched by the employer, and you get a lump sum when you retire, or after 5 years you can withdraw it. So those rules are there. So
Except that too
it's
many people withdraw it and don't leave enough for
retirement.
retirement.
Yeah,
So that's been one of the issues with the
provident
provident fund.
fund. Tharush, again, do you think we should increase the retirement age in government so that people who are at the age of 60 or 65 can work and a good amount of pension can be concentrated for those who are 70 plus?
I mean, you see, this issue has come up almost everywhere in the world, that longevity has increased. And when you say people have to retire at a certain
58, 60.
58, I mean, in state government employees, in many cases, I know in Orissa, 58, and people are actually completely healthy sometimes. All their parameters are absolutely fine. They were working till full day work, and then suddenly it goes to zero. So one of the things that other countries have done is allow for half day, allow for part time work. So when you do have a lot of experience and you bring a lot of value to whether it's a company or the government, and if you're healthy enough and want to continue working, then you could go into a part time mode.
Yeah.
So even if you think that, oh, we don't want to suddenly change it such that people go into full time work till 70,
Yeah.
because everyone may not be able to, but there should be two things there: one, allowing flexibility, so allowing part time, and allowing you to choose till how long you want to work, and you get the same sort of retirement
Yeah.
benefits when you do retire. And that's something that is being brought in many countries.
Anurag Singh, do you think the central government can stop any of the states from reversing the pension scheme by cutting down their share of central
No, I don't. I
funding?
don't think. I don't think that, because their share of central funding is, once the finance commission recommends and they get their share, then no, this is not something. This is not bullying that. So it's up to the state government.
Okay, Subodh Ghorpade and Aditya both have the same question, which we talked about in detail earlier. So if you can go back to if you rewind, watch the show from the beginning, you will get it. But I will quickly tell you, the question is the same. What is the old and what is the new pension scheme? Could you please explain? Basically, old pension scheme was you got 50% of your last drawn salary as the pension for the rest of your life, and there was a dearness allowance, which was increased every year as a inflation. It was benchmarked to inflation. Am I right on
Yeah,
that
yeah,
part?
yeah,
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 that's the old
yeah.
pension scheme. And new pension scheme is basically a part of your salary goes into a pension fund, and the government matches that and puts it into the pension fund. The pension fund invests that money in the market. There are different kinds of investment options: debt investment, equities, bonds, and your money grows. And once you retire, you get access to that money.
Or in one sentence, the old pension scheme was a defined benefit scheme, and the new pension scheme is a defined contribution scheme. So in the old one, benefits were fixed. In the new one, contribution is fixed.
I think we have run out of questions, and that was actually quite a, uh, thoughtful analysis because, like you said, our young viewers may not get attracted to pension, but I'm sure there are people in families, parents, uncles, grandparents who have.
Not just that, YP. What affects them may not be pensions, but education will get cut down.
Yeah.
And what it does,
Investment in education.
jobs will get cut down, because you keep paying old people. Many of your viewers will be taking exams like the civil services exams. Those jobs will be fewer because we are going to be paying pensions instead of paying salaries. So the government will not open new posts, will not open positions for teachers, for doctors, for nurses, hospitals, because, I mean, and the numbers are huge. It's like in
60,
Rajasthan, 56% of its revenue is going for pension. Yeah, so you do have to think about it not from the point of view necessarily of your own pension, but how does it affect you? How does it affect the job you were possibly hoping would open up?
Thank you so much, Ila. I think at some point of time we should discuss how does an economy support an aging population outside of pensions. I mean, generally.
Yes.
I mean, things like livelihoods, facilities, healthcare,
Reskilling.
reskilling, because I think this is a problem faced by many other countries in the world, which we haven't faced so much because our lifespans were not so high like they were in the West, or I mean, countries like Japan, where the old age population is so high and they struggle with these issues. We'll talk about it at some point of time when we get a good peg for that. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Economics. We will be back Friday this time with a regular Economics. This was a special episode, like I told you, and I will make an appeal. If you have not taken a subscription to the print, please do. We need your paid subscriptions to be able to do this regularly and bring you good journalism. Thank you so much and have a good week.